Hello, everyone. Again, I hope you and yours are safe and well. We are going to get into the field of ethics at this point, what I consider to be perhaps the most important and most interesting field of philosophy. Don't underestimate it. Ethics is really complex. We have a tendency in our culture to underestimate it, sometimes throw up our hands and say it's all opinion. I don't think you really believe that when it comes to certain really profound matters like euthanasia, the global oppression of women, racial injustice, cases like what happened to George Floyd. I don't think you think it's all completely subjective. You might, but I think most of you, at least, upon reflection, you take a position on that and you'll say something like, no, at least there are a couple of things in this world that are right, like showing kindness to a neighbor, and some things that are wrong, like beating a child simply because its hair is red. Think about this. Again, you might be a subjectivist, but I'm thinking most of you won't be. And to get there, you're going to need a lot of deep critical thinking and reflection to try to support that case. If you go to page 309, you'll find what I consider to be a useful map of where we're going in ethics. The question that we're going to focus on is there at least one ethical truth? If your position is that there is not even one ethical truth, not even one, you're a subjectivist. And we'll look at pro-subjectivist arguments. The other option is to say there is at least one ethical truth. And the question that comes from that follows from that, is this: what makes ethical truth true? One answer to that is called conventionalism. It's the view that ethical truth comes to be because of some kind of authority, because of somebody say so. Now, conventionalism comes in varieties. Some people think that the ultimate authority who say so makes it so in ethics is God. That's called divine command theory, the view that, say, murder is wrong because God said so, or that drinking alcohol is wrong because God said so. If somebody thinks something's wrong or right because God said so, that's called divine command theory. Now, there's more to the view than that, but that's the gist of it. The idea that ethical truth exists because of God's say so. Another position is going to be that ethical truth exists because culture says so. Let's call that cultural ethical relativism, the view that culture is the ultimate authority that shapes our minds and our very selves and all of our ethical ideas, such that culture is king. Culture's say so is what establishes ethical truth. Now, what other authority is left? You, the individual. I call that individual ethical relativism. Sober doesn't give it a title. He should have, and I think that's a pretty solid one. Individual ethical relativism. That's the view that there exists ethical truth. Where does it come from? What does it depend on? It depends on you, your individual will. Each individual wills ethical truth into existence. That's called individual ethical relativism. All right, those are three types of conventionalism that we just addressed. There's one other road open to you. If you think there is ethical truth, but it doesn't depend on say so, it doesn't depend on some authority, but rather depends on the facts of the case, then you're called a realist. So, for example, if your view is that slavery, colonial slavery of Black Africans, if your view is that that is fundamentally unfair, and you think it's unfair because it's rooted in fallacies, myths about Black people, myths about Africa, and that it's also cruel and unusual and unjustified, because you shouldn't be treated as a tool just because of your skin color. If you think slavery is wrong because of those facts, the facts of the case, not some authority, but the facts of the case, then you would identify as a realist in ethics. The next question that comes up there is, which facts should we focus on? Which facts of the case establish ethical truth? And that's when you get different schools of realism. For example, deontology is a famous school that goes way back to the Stoics over 2,000 years ago. The Stoics held a view that as a human being, you have certain rights. And so it's somebody else's duty to respect those rights. Duties and rights go hand in hand. And they held that reflective critical reason would reveal that. So they thought you didn't need some religious authority or culture, and that your reason, for example, should be able to just reflect on how Black African humans are humans just like you. They're not tools, and what they deserve is what you deserve, which is equal dignity and respect. The Stoics are famous for arguing against slavery, for arguing against the cruelty of the Roman Empire. And famously, Musonius Rufus argued against sexism and the oppression of women. That was 2,000 years ago, because they had this view of universal rights and duties. That famous school of ethics is called deontology. Another realist school that we're going to look at is called utilitarianism. The utilitarian said, look, what matters when we make a judgment about something's truly being right or wrong are not the motives, but rather the consequences of an action. So a utilitarian would say that if you were going to go do something that involved your neighbor today, and it generated outcomes that promoted the greater good for all, not just you, but the greater good for all, then that would be the right thing to do. So utilitarians argue that the ultimate principle of morality is the principle of utility, which is this: the right thing to do is to promote the greater good for the greater number. There are so many details in that school of thought. You can get into that reading sober. Finally, there's another school of ethics, an ancient school that is still predominant today, especially in modern psychology in the last 30 years, what is called positive psychology, if you want to look that up. This school of thought is called virtue ethics. In virtue ethics, the focus is on character. The focus is on what kind of person we are and whether we exhibit excellence as persons. As a person, but also within certain roles, like excellence as a friend, as a lover, as a counselor, as a teacher, as a student, as a piano player. Virtue ethics claims that we should look at both the consequences of an action and the motive behind an action, but ultimately the core phenomena to be studied in ethics and really focused on and developed is your character, excellence of character. Aristotle is famous for developing this position. If you're familiar with Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, that comes straight from Aristotle. The idea is that the central concern in ethics is to meet our basic needs, achieve our higher intellectual and spiritual needs, and achieve a level of full functioning as a human, mature intellectual and moral functioning within a community. That is conceived of as the good in terms of Aristotle's view of virtue ethics. And the core of all that is developing the virtues. It is through developing virtues such as courage, patience, wisdom, of course, fairness, kindness, generosity, that you realize life's greatest goods, such as friendship. There's no friendship without the virtues. There's no society that's worth living in without some virtues, primarily justice. Think about that for a minute. A society that doesn't have any justice in it, a nation that had no justice in it, wouldn't even be worth valuing and committing to. All right, again, there are many details there. I hope you really enjoy reading about this. I think that's enough for now. If you have any questions, send me an email. I wish you well. Bye-bye.